So we're up to Chav Zayin Amid Beis, and we learned in previously, the Gemara is going to explain now, that Ein Manichin Es Hamito Berechoiv. When it comes to Chol HaMoed, because of the sanctity of the Yontiv, the way they used to do is they used to place the coffin in the square of the city, and over there they would make eulogies and people would mourn. It would be like a very sad situation. So, but since it's Chol HaMoed, it's partially Yom Tov, so they didn't want people to be sad like that in the Yom Tov. So the Mishnah said, Ein manichin es hamito berechoiv. We don't leave the bed in the square. Amar Rapapa. So Rapapa comes to explain, and he says, Ein moyed bifnei talmid chacham. If the person who died is a sage, then you are allowed to eulogize him. Apparently, you can put the bed in the square because you can eulogize again. You can eulogize because a Talmud Chacham has a special rule. Because of the honor of the Talmud Chacham, it overrides the Chol HaMoed. Amar Rapapa says, Rapapa ein moyed bifnei Talmid Chacham. There is no Yom Tov, no Chol HaMoed in front of Talmud Chacham. And Rashi explains, ein moyed bifnei Chachamim, sheyicholim lahaspida, you can eulogize it. If we're even allowed to eulogize a Talmud Chacham on Chol HaMoed Katan, the Kolshkein Chanukah Upurim. Well, Chanukah and Purim are based on the rabbis. That's not even a Torah. Chol HaMoed from the Torah. So since we're even allowing the eulogy on Chol HaMoed, so for sure, the Kol Shekain, that you're allowed to do a eulogy for a Talmud Chacham on Chanukah and Purim. Although normally we don't do eulogies on Chanukah and Purim, but if he's a Talmud Chacham, then you can do the eulogy. And then the Gemara qualifies this. The Gemara says, V'hani mili b'fonov. Only in front if the deceased is over here. When he's here, you can do a eulogy. But if he's not here, so let's say he died in another city, you are not permitted to make the eulogy over here, loy, then you're not allowed to. If he's not here, then it does not override Chol HaMoed, Chanukah, and Purim, only if he's over there. The Gemara challenges this. The Gemara says, Eini, but that's not true. That's not so. Because we find, V'horav Kahana, over there, Rav Kahana, he eulogized Rav Zvid of Nehardo in Pumnara. That wasn't the place where Rav Zvid lived. He wasn't there. He wasn't. The coffin wasn't there, and still Rav Kahana eulogized him. It must have been on Chol HaMoed that he eulogized him. But you said that only if he's there. But here you see the fact is that he eulogized Rav Zvidor Nardo and Pumnara, even though he wasn't there, and it was Chol HaMoed. Amar Rapapi. So Rapapi answers this, and he says, Yoim Shmua Hava. That's the day that the news arrived. On the day that the news arrived, Uzuki Befon of Dami. That's treated like he was there, even though he wasn't actually there. But that was the first time the news reaches them. When the news reaches them for the very first time, that's considered like he's there, and that would override as well. So you have two things. First of all, in front of him, and also if that's the news just reached you, then you can do a eulogy also on Chol HaMoed, and I guess on Chanukah Purim for sure. You have the different terminologies, how you mourn the dead. Is what's called hesped. Hesped usually means a eulogy, but it's also a physical expression. So Amar Ula said hesped alev. Hesped is on the heart. So you sort of bang next to the heart. That's where you bang. That's the hesped. Diksiv, the verse says, Al Shodayim Soivdim. On the breast you eulogize. So that's where the hesped is. Soivdim is Al Shadayim, is over the heart. Tipuach, that's another one. That's biyad. That's clapping with the hands. Rashi says tipuach biyad. Rashi says that means koifetz yad zulezu. He bangs one hand into the other. That's tipuach. And kilus is beregel. That's with the foot stamping. Beregel, Dr. Makke Ragle bekarka, he stamps his foot in the ground. These are the different ways of expression: banging against your heart, clapping your hands, or stamping your feet. These are all expression of eulogy, expression of pain, the different types. So now we learned in Abraisa, Hamekalis, the one who's clapping with his feet, stamping, lo yikalis besandal, should not bang with a slipper, only with a shoe, because you can bang away and the slipper might slip off. I guess I never thought of it that way. That's why it's called a slipper, right? Because it slips on and slips off. So the Gemara says you should not stamp with the sandal. Why? Because you can endanger himself. You're going to be banging with your feet on a slipper, it might slip off. He says sandal, because he turns over the slipper, the sandal. He'll break his foot. So therefore, don't stamp with a sandal, but rather with a shoe. Rabbi Yochanan, various different halachas, the Gemara's collection over here. Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan, Ovel kivon sheni ana roishay. Once he moved his head, basically it seems like he's down, and people coming to him, and he has his head down, and he looks like he's in mourning. But once he moved his head and he stand up, that means that he's already been comforted. So Nina Roishay, Rashi teaches what it means is Shenira Shenicha Ma'atzma. It seems that he's already by himself comforted. He doesn't need people to comfort him. Shuv ein menachamim rashoim lashev leishev etzli. So those who want to comfort are no longer have permission to sit next to him because he's all done. I guess if you see him in that situation, maybe that's not the time to go and be menachem. Another halacha said Rabbi Yochanan, Hakoil chayovim lamed mipnei nosi. When the nosi walks in, the leader, the nosi, the prince, everybody has to get up from him. Chutz me'ovel v'choila. The exception is a mourner doesn't have to get up, and a person who is sick don't have to get up. But Rabbi Yochanan says that once they get up, l'koil emrim lem shvul, until they have to tell them, they have to remain standing until you tell them sit down, because they can sit down already. When they stand up in front of the nosi, you have to tell them to sit down. The Abu you don't have to tell them to sit down, because they don't even have to get up. So they can therefore sit down on their own. They don't need you to tell them, go ahead and sit down, because they don't even have to get up. So therefore, they sit down on their own. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marab, said Rabbi Yehuda name of Rab, Ovil Yom Rishon Osur Lecha Lecha V'Shaloi. A mourner on the first day is not allowed to eat his own bread. That's called the Sudas Havra, that you bring for the mourner, the first meal. Not allowed to eat by himself. Where do we see this? With the Amalei Rachmana li Yecheskel. The Torah, the Eibush says to Yecheskel, this is the Pasuk in Yecheskel. In Perek Chodalet, the Pasuk tells them the various different mourning for his wife who passed away. Over there, he tells him a special rule: the lechem anoshim lo yitoichal. The Eibush tells him not to mourn. So the Eibush tells him don't eat people's bread, which means normally people would bring the bread and you would eat all from other people, not from your own. But in this case, the Eibishter gives the instruction that lechem anoshim loy teichal. So from here we know that ordinarily a Ovel does not eat his own bread. The Gemara says, Rabbi v'Rabbi Yosef machalfi sudesayu lahadodi. So instead of having other people bring them, they would exchange their meals. So it turned out that they were both. I'm not sure if they were both mourning for the same person. I don't know, but nevertheless, this is telling us instead of bringing it from the outside, you can just exchange your meal. So that means you're not eating from your own. So we find this also with regards to Purim, like the Purim meal that you have to give matonis ish l're'eu, shlach monas. So instead of shlach monas, so each one would take their meal and give it to the other one. So they would exchange their meals. So that's the way they did shlach monas. But here they did it also so the mourner would not give his own. Further says Rabbi Yehuda, the name of Rab. Meis ba'ir, if there is a person who died in the city, called b'nei ha'ir asurim b'asiyas malacha. The entire people of the city are prohibited to doing work. Can't do work if there is a person that died. And apparently the reason is because you need the people to take care, make sure to bury him and everything else. So the Gemara says, La hamnuna ikra l'droi mosa. He came across to the city of Droi Mosa, and Shoma Koil Shipura the Shichva. He heard the announcement, the Shipura, the Shofar, the announcement of the Shichva that somebody died. So there's a dead in the city. Then he saw these people, they were going on doing their work. So he was very upset because Rabbi Yehuda Rav said that if somebody died, you can't go to work. Amar lahu. So he said to those people, let these people be excommunicated. Why are you doing work? Isn't there somebody dead in the city? Why are you doing the work? He excommunicated them. So they responded to him, there is groups in the city. Basically, there's groups that take care of each other. So therefore, this was from the other group, and they're not needed over there. Rashi, these are groups. This group buried their own dead. This group there from their group levadam by themselves. So you don't need to have the whole city stop because there is a group for each one. So he said to them, now I'm going to permit it to you. He excommunicated them. He says, no, okay. Now you explain, so now you're permissible. Said Rabbi Yehuda Rav, one who is too hard and too much hard on himself for the person who died, more than necessary, then that he'll be crying for somebody else. As we'll see later in the Gemara, because you're basically saying that what Hashem is doing is wrong. If you're crying too much, you're saying you have more compassion than Hashem. That's why we'll see soon. The Gemara says a very scary story. The Gemara says, there was this woman, she was in the neighborhood of Rav Huna. Havelu Shiva Boni, she had 7 sons. So one of them died. Habes Kabacha Biserta Ale. She cried very much for him. Serta means extra, too much. Sholach lo Rav Huna lo tabdi. Don't do so. Too much. Lo ashgechabe. So she didn't pay attention to him. She kept on doing it. Sholach lo, so he sent to her like this. Eat sizes, if you're going to listen to me, mutav, then fine. But viloi sovis zavadeto liidoch meis. Prepare I don't know, prepare your, I guess your coffin for another death. I'm not sure the exact translation. If you don't want, you're not going to listen. Zavad, I think it's Chovis Zavadita Li'idach Meis. Pack up your suitcase for the other day. Basically, it's going to go. Another one is going to die. And that happened to Mesikulu. So oldest son died. Apparently, she didn't stop for all of them. And then they all died. Soif Omar, then he told her, Timur Zavadita L'nafshich. Go ahead, prepare your own coffin. Umisa, she also died. They all died. Very strange story, you know. I mean, but then the Gemara brings a pasuk of Yirmiyahu in chapter 22. It says, "Al tifkul lemeis." Don't cry for somebody who died. Val tanuduloi, and don't mourn him. What does it mean? Literally, don't cry. Why not? And what does this mean? So the Gemara explains this. Al tifkul lemeis, don't cry, meaning yoser medai, more than necessary. Val tanuduloi, and don't mourn him, yoser mikishir, more than the measure. Don't keep on. Okay, so what does it mean too much? So the Gemara says like this: Shloisha yomim lebechi, 3 days for crying. Veshiva, 7 days lahesped for eulogy. Ushloishim, and 30 days legihutz v'letispoidus is for ironing and taking a haircut. So the first 3 days you cry, the 7 days you eulogize, and 30 days you iron and you take a haircut. From here on, after 30 days, Hashem says, you are not more compassionate than me. In other words, you're still crying. And so David says, no, don't go beyond it. Then there's a pasuk in Yirmiyah, it says, go cry and cry for one who goes. What does it mean, one who goes? Why are we crying for one who goes? One who goes means of Rabbi Yehuda. If one who goes who doesn't have any children, then cry for him. And the Gemara goes as far as saying Rabbi Shimon Levi le'ozel lebe'ovla. He never wanted to go to a mourner's house because of wasting time from learning. Elo lemanda ozel b'leiboni. If somebody didn't left this world without children, meaning he was so smitten that he didn't have any children, then he went. Cry for one that goes, meaning if he leaves this world without having any children. Then the pasuk says, for he will no longer return. And see the place where he was born. What does it mean that he will never return? It means he'll never do tshuva. He'll never see his place of birth. He'll never come back. What does that mean? It says, Mashma mikan ve'elech lo yaseh lo'elam tshuva. It's mashma that from here on, he will never do tshuva. He'll never go back. Who's this person that will never go back? Who are we talking about? He says, lo yoshev, he won't return. Rav Huna says, one who committed a sin and he repeated it, he won't turn back. That's it. Why?
Anyone who committed a sin? Anyone who committed any sin?
Well, the point is not the point is that he kept on after he repeated it. So why? Why would another? He did a sin, and he didn't, and he repeated it. So why is he never going to do teshuvah? So he says, Rav Huna goes by his reasoning. The Amar Rav Huna, for Rav Huna said, Kivon sha'over odom aveda v'shonabo putrulei. If a person violated the sin and then he repeats it, it's become permitted to him. What does it mean? Who permitted it to him? No. If you do a sin more than once, it's been permitted. I mean, the Gemara says, does it enter your mind that it was permitted? Why the rabbis allow him to do it? Because he did it once and he did it a second time. So that's why it's permitted? No. But you say nas is like a heter. It becomes like something permissible. It's not like they permitted it for him. This, because he's already done it once and twice, it becomes like something that is permitted. So basically, he's not going to do tshuva because you get yourself into that, and therefore, that's what the pasuk means. Lo yoshuv oid, he won't do tshuva because he has done it again. According to Rav Huna. Amar Rabbi Levi, says Rabbi Levi, these 3 periods we talked about before, we talked about 3 days, we talked about 7 days, we talked about shloshim. So he says like this: Ovel shloshis yom morishenim. The first 3 days, yiras atzme ki ilu cherev munachas loibein shteik seifov. He should see himself as if there is a sword laying between your 2 shoulders, meaning over your head. In other words, you should be so subdued, you should be so under the gun that sword may come right down. The sword is between your shoulders, right up your head, can come down. That's how you should look at yourself. And then Mishloy Shabbat Shiva, but from 3 until 7, that means after 3 days until 7 days, Kilo Marachas Lo Kenegde B'Shuk, as if it's laying opposite you in the market. The sword is not here. It's not over your head, but it's not too far away. That's how subdued you should feel. Mikan ve'elech, but from here and on, after that, is ki'ilu averes kenegde b'shuk. It's just as if it's passing by you in the street. Meaning, again, these are all different levels of how much fear he has from it. So he says that much fear that you should look as if it's over kenegde, as if it's going to. You see it here. Okay. Then, yeah, go ahead.
No, I think I remember when Eddie Fistel passed away.
When who? Yeah.
Someone quoted this Gemara in the drasha that Shabbos.
They what?
They quoted this Gemara in the drasha, the Shabbos, after Eddie Fistel passed away.
So I'm not hearing what they did. What did you say they did?
They quoted this Gemara in the drasha, the Shabbos after Eddie Fistel passed away.
Yeah.
So,
that was in the while you were in Sharon over here. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Okay, then the Mishnah said, so we're talking about specifically not having this eulogy and in the courtyard, in the square because of Yontif, but it says women, we never put them in the square because there might be a degradation, because there might be blood over there, so they never put them in the square. They qualify. They say, no, that's not always. When is this said that you don't put women in the square? Only if she was giving birth. A woman who dies while she was giving birth and she's all bloodied, she died because of the baby and she's flowing a lot of blood, then we don't put her in the square. Avol shar nashim, but the other women, manichim, you could put them, is not a problem. Rabbi Lezer said, no, afilu shar hanoshim, even other women, we also don't put them in the square. You bury them right away. So we don't eulogize them. We don't put them in the square. He says the ksiv, because we see in the pasuk, it says, Batomas Shom Miriam. Miriam died there, and immediately it says, Batikover Shom, that she was buried there. She died there and buried there. That means Samuch Lemisa Kvura, that very close to the death was the burial. There was no interruption, no squares, no eulogies like we do it. So that's why He says generally women we don't put them in the square. Not only the other one said only Chaya, the other one, but Rabbi Elazar said even other women as well. Bama Rabbi Elazar says Af Miriam ben Eshika Mesa. Also Miriam died with a kiss. It says by Moshe and Aaron, it says that he died al Pi Hashem, by the mouth of Hashem. Pi Hashem means, we translate that to mean, and Moshe Rabbeinu, when he saw that Aaron died al Pi Hashem, he yearned for that Misa as well. So they both died al Pi Hashem with a kiss. But he says that also Miriam died with a kiss. How do we know this? Because it says Asher Shom Shom in Moshe. Here it says that Thomas Shom. By Moshe it says Vayomos Shom Moshe Yishalikim also Shom. So just like Moshe died with a kiss, she died with a kiss as well. Why doesn't it say very clearly Why doesn't it say explicitly by the mouth of Hashem? That's embarrassing to say. To say Hashem, that Hashem kissed a woman, I guess that's an embarrassing thing. So we don't say it. But that did happen. Also, Miriam died with a kiss. Rabbi says Rabbi Lama dismacha misyas Miriam leparshas paraduma. Why is the death of Miriam brought close to the portion of paraduma, of the red heifer? Because we find in the Torah says by beginning of the parshas Chukas, tells us the story about the paraduma. Then the Torah says, "Vatomas Shom, Miriam died there." Why does it put this next to each other? Loimer to teach you, to tell you, just like the red heifer atones, af misoson shel tzadikim mechaperes, also the death of tzadikim atones as well. Okay, there's a whole shot of the Alter Rebbe. He writes in the Tanya, he brings down in the Geras HaKodesh. He says, why did we choose Dafke Paraduma? Because Paraduma is actually done outside. It atones for greater levels of Tumas Mace. It's outside, and still it atones. The Mises Tzadikim reach very deep, not just an ordinary korban which comes for a shoygeg or sometimes even. But this is at the furthest, the Paraduma, that's called a Chatusikri. But it's because it's very far away. Still, the Misa of Tzadikim has the power to atone even in that level. Amar Rabbi Elazar says, Rabbi Elazar, why is the death of Aaron brought close to the garments of Kahuna? He says that he put him on the garments and then he died. Because the garments kohen are atoned when the kohen wears the begotten with atones. Similar, like we said by Miriam. Also, the death of tzaddikim atones. That's why it is brought next to the bidei. Says the Gemara, Meis pisoim, if he dies suddenly, which means he wasn't sick. Zui misa chatufa, that's called a grab death. Death grabbed him. Caught off guard, totally. Misa chatufa. If chola yoim echad b'meis, if he was sick for one day and then he dies, zui misa techufa, that's a pushed died very quickly. Rav Chanani ben Gamliel, Rav Chanani says, "Zui misas magefa." That's called a misa of a plague for one day. Shenemar, because the Torah says in the pasuk in Yechezkel says, "Ben Adam hineni lokech me'mechoes machma deinech b'magefa." Human being, that is to Yechezkel, I will be taking the treasure of your eyes. That's his wife in a plague. So he tells him that his wife is going to die. Uksiv. And it says further in the pasuk, it says there, "By I spoke to the people in the morning, but Thomas Ishti Ba'erev, and my wife died in the evening." So you see, one day later, and the Torah says B'magefa. So you see that the next day is called the Magefa. Shnei Yomim B'meis. If it takes 2 days for it to die, Zui Misa D'chuyu. That's a delayed death. It was 2 days. Gimel, 3 days, and then he dies guided, like a yell. Arba. Nizifa, that's being told off. That's a Chamisha Zui Mises Kololim. 5 days sick, that's the normal sicknesses for 5 days. All these apparently are unique, special ways of dying, and sometimes I think it has a connotation of being maybe derogatory, calling it a hatufa, dchufa, not the way. The other ways, Gimel Arba Nizifa Chamish Misukhlab. Amar Rav Chana Mikra. Where do we have a pasuk to explain this? That it's 5 days is the usual way. So he says like this. What's the pasuk for that? Because it says like this: Hein korvi yamecha. Hein is chan. Hein, the word is in Greek. It's hein means one. Korvu, they come close. That's plural. Istrei. Yamecha is also days. Istrei. 2, and 1 is 5. Hochamish, you have 5. Hein chad. Why is hein chad? Shekein beloshin yivoni koidim la'achas hein. Because in Yivoni they call achas one hein. So hein means 1. Korvu is 2. Yamecha is 2. Together 2 and 2, and 1 is 5. What happens? Meis b'chamishim shana, if he dies at 50. Zuhi misas koros. That is called a death of koros. Chamishim ushtayim shana. If he dies at 52, Zuhi misosi shel Shmuel Haramosi. Shmuel Haramosi died at 52. Which, by the way, tonight is the second day of Iyar, which is the birthday of the Rebbe Marash. His name was Shmuel. He only lived 48 years. He lived 4 years less than Shmuel Haramosi. But 52 is the age of Shmuel Haramosi. Shmuel Hanavi. Shishim. So 60, do Mrs. B'dei Shamayim. 50 is Kores, 60 is Mrs. B'dei Shamayim. Amar Marzutra Mikra, where do we have a pasuk that's 60 Mrs. B'dei Shamayim? Because the pasuk in Eve says, Tovei B'kelach Elai Kover. When you come B'kelach, Kelach is Gematria 60. Okay, how? Beis and Chof is 22. And 30 is 52, and 8 is 60. Is Tove B'kelach, when you come Kelach, you turn 60, Elai Kover, then you get buried by me. That means cut off, because he was cut off. Not sure exactly. That was a Misa B'dei Shamayim there. Shivim, if you live to 70, that's Seba, that's old age. Shmoinim is Gehuras, his strength. The Ksiv, Pasuk says, until in Tzadik Yimeshna Seinabem Shivim Shana, the days in this world are 70 years. In Gevures Shmeinim Shana. But if you get to the level of Gevures, you actually get 80 days. 80 years. So you have 70 or 80s. So before we said Kodesh is at 50. The Gemara changes now and says, Amarova mechamishim shona maila, from 50 and above, basically, not just 50. From 50 and above, that's already that's we call it. You don't have to die at 50. Anytime from 50 to 60. Up till 60 years, Zuhi Mrs. Kodesh, that's Kodesh from 50 to 60. How come it doesn't count those years between 50 and 60? The honor of Shmuel Haramosi. He died at 52. You shouldn't say that he also died because of Kodesh. So that's why he doesn't say from 50 to 60, because he didn't want to include Shmuel Haramosi in it. So that's why he said only 50. Zog the Gemara, that Rabbi Yosef, Kehavi Bar Shitin, when he turned 60, Avadlu Yom Tov Rabbanon, he made a good party for the rabbis. Avadlu Yom Tov Rabbanon, he made a Yom Tov for the rabbis. Amri, and he said, Nafkali Mikoris. I have left Koris, after 50 years, after 60, there's no longer Koris. Amalei Abaye. So Abaye says to him, yeah, you may have, you're making a party, you're not going to have Koris of years because you lived beyond 60. But what about being cut off in the days? You made, see, that's what called Koris. Misachatufa, meaning dying right away, without any warning. That would be like Koris. Minofik did you then? So why are you partying? You don't know that you might be dying misachatufa. So he said to him, hold on to half of it. At least I know now that I'm not going to die chorus of years because I'm beyond 60. Whether I will be dying chorus of days being a misachatufa, I don't know. Palga, the mekoris the shonim paltali. At least I've escaped the chorus of years. That I'm not going to get anymore. Okay. Gemara says Ravuna noch nafshi pisa. Ravuna all of a sudden he died all of a sudden. Havakadainu Rabbanon. Havakadaige Rabbanon. The Rabbanon was, I guess, were worried. Daigi. Tanuluhu Zuga de Mehadayev. So there was a group, a peer of Talmidei Chachomim from Hadayev. They said that the only time that we say that a misachatufa, it's only if he hasn't reached 80. If you reach to 80, and you die right away, zuhi misas neshika, that's called a death of a kiss. Okay? Gil ligvuris, you miss neshika. Omar Rava says Rava, chayi boni umezoini. Life, children, and sustenance. He says, it doesn't depend on your merits. Allah b'mazla, it hinges on luck. How does he know that? He says, no, it's not, you don't earn it. It's just by luck. He says, the Rabbi and Rabbi Chizda, look, there were two great rabbis, Rabbi and Rabbi Chizda. Tarbayu Rabbanon Tzadiki, they were both righteous tzadikim. How do I know? Mar Matzli, this one would pray, the rain would come if there was a drought. Umar Matzli, the other one would pray and the rain would come. So they both could bring down the rain through their prayer. And look at the difference. Rabbi Chizda lived for 92 years old, and the Rabbi Chaim only lived 40. So they were both tzaddikim. If life depended on a zechus, they should both live the same life. Why did he die at 40? He says that it means that it doesn't go, it has to do with the mazel. And mazel means basically it could be that's the destiny. When that's the many years you have to live in this world, nothing to do with what you do. The Eibishter sets up a certain amount of life for you, and that's it. So the Gemara, by Rav Chizda, in the house of Rav Chizda, he lived for 92 years. It was Shitin Hilula. There was 60 parties. And by Rabbi Shitin Tichli, by Rav there was 60 problems. There was 60 deaths. And they're both tzaddikim again. He lived a long time and he had a lot more. But Rav Chizda was so rich that so that's going to prove about first of all about children. First thing he talked about chai, life. The next thing he proved about children because he had 60 parties and he had 60 deaths in the family. So you see, then about food, Bein Abchizda, Smida lekalba. They used to give smida, that's the best kind of grain. They would feed the dogs, the smida. The boy, there was no problem. There was no, had enough. That's how rich he was. Bei Rabba, but in the house of Rabba, Nama decidedly inshi, they would feed the people out of barley. They didn't have grain. They didn't have smida. They didn't have even wheat at all. They only had barley. But the it wasn't common. So you see, in all three areas, Rabbi didn't have any less life, less children, and less food, and they were both tzaddikim. So that's a mazel. That's the way the destiny for each one to be. Well, Rava says, "Hani klas mili boyi kamishmai." The following three things I asked from Hashem. Tartu yovli, two things they gave me. Choda lo yovli, but one thing they did not give me. They gave me two things, one thing not. He asked for Chuchmasod Rav Huna, for the wisdom of Rav Huna. V'utred Rav Chizda, and the wealth of Rav Chizda. We see Rav Chizda very rich. V'yovuli, they gave me that. So Rav had that. But on this Nusa, the Rabba Bar Rav Huna, but the humility of Rabba Bar Rav Huna, lo yohovuli, that I didn't get. He didn't get that level. He prayed for that humility, but he didn't get it. So the Gemara relates Rav Sa'odim Achu had Rabba. So Rav Sa'odim, who was a brother of Rabba, have a Yosef Kamed Rabba, and he was sitting in front of Rabba. That was Rabba, his brother. He saw him that he started snoozing or he started convulsion. He was dying. His brother saw Rabba dying. Menamnim Zotrashi Goisus. He was being Goisus before his death. Amalei. So Rava says to Rav Sa'odim, Amalei Rava Rav Sa'odim, Lemele Mar, why don't you tell the Malach HaMoves, the Loilet Su'uri, not to cause me pain, the Loilet Tzaran. Tell the Malach HaMoves not to go, he wants to take my soul. Let him just take my soul. Why is he giving me this pains before death? So Rav Sa'odim says, Mar, Your Honor, Lavshu Shvinahu, aren't you his Shoshvin? Meaning buddy of the Malach HaMoves, meaning you should have impact. Why do you need me to tell him? So why are you asking me to on your behalf to the Malach HaMoves? Why don't you say him yourself? Amalei, so Rava said to him, Kiv on the Imsar Mazlo. Since my fortune has been given over, my luck, Imsar Mazlo, meaning Isra Mazole, my fortune has now became bad. He doesn't pay attention to me. So maybe to you he'll pay attention. Amar Lei, so Rav Sa'odim says to Rava, Lischazi Limar, I want you to come to me, show yourself to me. Basar Misa, after you die, I want to see you. Ischazi. So he showed himself to him. Amar Lei, Havale Lamar Tzara. So he says, did you have any pain? He was asking him, was there pain involved in the, I guess, with the Malach HaMoves over there? So he told him, Richta de Chusilta. Richta de Chusilta, it's a kind of a growing things. I guess not such a big. I'm not sure I'm not sure exactly, but I guess it wasn't that bad. I guess. Rava, see if there's a commentary here. Let me see. Rabbi Abakiyos coming to Rab Nachman. Rabbi was sitting in front of Rab Nachman. Chazi de Komenamnim. So he also saw that he was goisesing, he was having convulsion before his death. Amar lei, leima marad lei litzaren. So Rab Nachman says to Rabbi, tell the Malach HaMoves not to cause me pain. Amar lei. So Rabbi said, Rab Nachman, Mar lavodom choshu, aren't you an important person? Mar leima leimar, why don't you tell him this? Why don't you take the Malach HaMoves yourself? Amar lei, so he said to him, Man choshiv, who is important? Man Sofin, who's important? Who's Man Rakia? Also expression of who is this important to be able to no, at that point there is nothing to there. I guess Sofin is a scribe. And who can stretch, can't argue with the Malach HaMoves. Rashi says Sofin Rakia Misukan the Miboimene. Who is fixed to demand from the Malach HaMoves? Meaning you don't have, you're not have the qualification to tell the Malach HaMoves. Amar lei, so Rav said Rav Nachman is Chazi Limar. I want you to appear to me. Amar lei. So when he showed his Chazile, so he asked him, Havale Lamar Tzaira, was it painful? He asked him a similar question. Amar lei kimishcha banisa mechalba. Again, these are all mesholim. What is kamishchal? What is kamishchal banisa mechalba? That's like pulling a fish from milk. Mishchal means to pull, but nisa fish mechal of milk, meaning it's easy. The Amar Li Hakadosh Baruch Hu Zil Bahu Alma Kad Havis. If the Eibishter would tell me, go to that world as it was, Loi Bein, I would not want. Why? The Nofish be Yisusa, because it's very scary. The Malach HaMoves, I guess. It's very scary. Rabbi Lozer was eating truma. It's chazile. The Malach HaMoves appeared to him. Amalei. So Rabbi Lozer is saying truma kachilo. Well, I'm eating truma. Isn't it called kodesh? Hopefully, shaita. Wait for me a little bit. He didn't want to die while he's eating kodesh. Rav Sheshes chazile b'shuket. Rav Sheshes, he appeared in the street. He was going to take his life there. Amalei b'shuket ki behema. I want me to take me like an animal in the street. Isa legabe beisa, come to my house. The Gemara says, Rabashi is chazile b'shuka. Rabashi also, the Malach HaMoves came to him in the street, in the marketplace. Amalei israch litlos in yomeh. Wait for me, drag along for 30 days. Ba'adrei l'talmudei, so that I can review my learning, my studies. The Amritu, because you say, Ashrei mishabolekam v'talmudei biyodei. How fortunate is the one who comes here with his learning. So give me time to study, review my Talmud. B'yom plosin also, on the 30th day he came. Amar lei, so he said to him, I kula hai kadochta raglo. My kula hai. Why is it so, why are you, right on the 30th day he came? So he answered him, Kadoch raglo de barnoson. The foot of Barnoson is pushing me because he had to become a Nossi. He was supposed to take over after Rabashi. So his time was up. So therefore he had to take Rabashi's life so that Nosson can take his place. One governance does not touch the other governance, even as a here, not even a drop. The Gemara says that Rav Chizda lo have a yochel. The Malach HaMovis could not take Rav Chizda's life. Why? The lo have a shosik puma megirsa. He never stopped. His mouth never stopped learning, so he couldn't approach him. Solik Yosef Barza de Rav. So he went and he sat on a cedar by the house of Rav, and Poka Arza. So the cedar broke. The shosek, so he silenced. The yochel dan, he was able to take his life. The Gemara says that Rav Chizda lo have a mosel mikra. To Rav Chizda, he couldn't get close to take his life. Yom echad id malei kaniyah. One day he appeared to Rav Chia as a poor person. Osi toref hababa, he came and knocked at the door. Amar lei, apik lirifto, give me a piece of bread. Apikli, they gave him. Amar lei, so he said to him, Lavko merachem mara anya. Aren't you then having compassion for a poor person? You open the door. Ahu gabra, that person on the Malach HaMovis. Why aren't you having? Why don't you let me do? Why don't you have compassion for me? I've been given the job to bring you to the other world. Why don't you allow me to do? Why don't you have compassion? Galilei. So he revealed himself to him. He looked like a poor person. He showed him a whip of fire. He knew he was the Malach HaMovis now, because he showed him the whip. So he took his soul from him. So that's when he died. Okay, this is it. Then we have one more Mishnah left, and then I think we'll finish the parak. So
beautiful.
What's next week? I think we'll do it in one more time. It's like a page and a half left, almost and a half. I think we'll do it. Everybody have a good night.
What's the next
Gemara? See you next week in Mitzvah Shem.
What's the next Gemara?
Make a decision. I'll wait for you to make a decision. Do you have any Gemara? Let's take a vote.
Okay.
No, I don't. For me, whatever you want to learn, something in Masechta Moed, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very flexible.
Which one?
Very flexible. Whatever you pick.